How did ancient humans express gender? You're walking down the street today and you see someone with long hair wearing a dress, someone else with short hair and a suit, someone with makeup and someone without. You instantly make assumptions about their gender identity based on these visual cues. But here's what's fascinating. That entire system of gender expression, the one that feels completely natural and inevitable to you, might be one of humanity's strangest and most recent inventions. And ancient humans, they were doing something radically different, something that completely rewrites what we thought we knew about gender in prehistoric societies. Let me start by addressing the elephant in the room. We don't have written records from ancient humans. We don't have diaries. We don't have interviews. What we have are bones, artifacts, and burial sites, and the story they tell is nothing like the gender binary you've been taught to expect. In fact, the oldest evidence we have of humans deliberately expressing gender through clothing and adornment comes from a place that would absolutely shock modern gender theorists. Around 100,000 years ago, in what is now South Africa, archaeological evidence shows that both men and women were wearing jewelry. We're talking shells, bone beads, crafted ochre pigments. These weren't accidents, these weren't random objects. The effort required to create these items, to source them, to string them together, was significant. The fact that we find them in graves associated with both male and female skeletons suggests something crucial. Expressing yourself through personal adornment wasn't gender specific, it was just human. But wait, there's more. Around the same time period, in sites across Europe and Asia, we find evidence of something even more interesting. Status items weren't distributed by gender the way modern societies do. In some societies, we find elaborate headdresses and decorative items in graves of women who were hunters and warriors. In others, we find delicate, ornamental items in the graves of men. The pattern isn't random, it's social, and it has nothing to do with the gender binary. Here's where this gets really weird. Some of the most elaborate gender expression we've found in ancient human societies comes from cultures where rigid gender categories didn't actually exist in the way we think about them. Take the societies of the Pacific Northwest coast, where archaeological and ethnographic evidence shows complex systems of gender expression that included what we might call third gender roles. These weren't people who failed to fit into the binary. These were recognized, respected positions in society with specific clothing, hairstyles, and social responsibilities. The gender expression wasn't confusing to them, it was perfectly clear. Now, let's talk about what this tells us. Modern humans assume that gender expression is either biological destiny or, more recently, individual choice. But ancient societies seem to understand something different entirely. Gender expression was a tool for communicating social role, status, spiritual beliefs, and community membership. A woman who wore warrior's regalia wasn't making a statement about her identity, she was communicating her occupation. A man who wore fine beads and elaborate face paint wasn't questioning his gender, he was advertising his status and wealth. The real plot twist is that this system was actually more flexible than ours. In modern society, breaking gender expression codes is a statement. It's political, it's personal. In ancient societies, gender expression was more like a uniform. It communicated information to your community, and the uniforms themselves changed wildly depending on where and when you lived. Archaeological evidence from sites in Siberia shows that some of the most valued clothing items, the ones made from the most expensive furs, the ones that required the most skilled labor, show up in the graves of women. Not because women had special rights to wear nice things, but because those women held important social positions. In pre-Columbian Americas, elaborate feathered headdresses and painted bodies weren't gendered the way we might assume. They were spiritual and political. A person's gender expression communicated their relationship to the sacred, to power, to their community's cosmic order. But here's the thing that really changes everything. The archaeological record suggests that ancient humans weren't obsessed with policing gender expression the way modern societies are. We don't find the evidence of brutal social punishment for gender nonconformity. What we find is diversity. In sites across multiple continents and time periods, we find evidence of people wearing clothing and ornaments that don't fit into strict gender categories. And instead of being buried in marginal sites or treated as anomalies, many of these individuals received elaborate burials. They were respected, they mattered. This doesn't mean ancient humans didn't have gender concepts. They absolutely did. But their concepts were networked to practical information, to spirituality, to social role, not to a rigid binary, and certainly not to the idea that certain expressions were shameful or wrong. The question isn't really how ancient humans expressed gender. The better question is why we got so weird about it. Why did modern human society narrow something that was once flexible into something that feels fixed and inevitable? And the answer might be darker than you'd like. As societies became more stratified, as wealth and power became inherited and concentrated, controlling reproduction became increasingly important, and that meant controlling gender with unprecedented strictness. The rigid gender binary, it's not ancient, it's industrial, and we're only just now beginning to move past it. Ancient humans would probably look at modern gender debates and think we're missing the whole point. They weren't asking whether gender expression was natural or chosen, they were just expressing it and moving on. And maybe that's the real lesson. The way we're doing it now isn't inevitable, it's not biological, it's not even that old, and that means it can change.